It has been 3 years since the COVID-19 outbreak in Wuhan, China. Ever since, the world changed, tearing apart relationships, work patterns, and travel. The global total of cases is expected to reach 600 million this year. Despite 14 emergency WHO meetings since the pandemic began, countries are opening up despite the unwavering number of cases. We look at how COVID continues to unravel in different countries around the world. Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks, covering the latest global news analysis from a Taiwan perspective. I'm Gladys.
I'm Rath Wang. Coming up on our show today, Taiwan legislator, former ambassador at large and physician Lin Jingyi tells us about the country's phased approach in opening up and relaxing mask mandates.
We have over 85% people receive more than 2 doses of vaccination. That is very high proportions in the pandemic control. We have a new policy announced about to decrease the control, especially have a more softer about the face mask policy.
We then discuss how Taiwanese face masks have won global praise and helped raise Taiwan's global profile as part of country's Taiwan Can Help campaign.
Taiwan US-born pulmonologist Dr. William Chang then tells us how Taiwan's humanistic, effective pandemic response differs from his experience on the front lines as COVID shut down the United States.
We're seeing the first wave back in April 2020. The ICU was full. We were asked to use N95 mask 5 days straight. At that time, and I remember the patient dying.
Lastly, we will discuss how COVID-19 continues to affect populations around the world and whether we are really out of the woods. Welcome to the show. Joining us in the studio today, we have 2 guests. So first of all, we're going to introduce you distinguished professor at the National Taiwan University Institute of Environmental and Occupational Health Science, Professor Chang-chuan. Professor is also Innovation Board Research Committee Chair at the Center for Asia-Pacific Resilience and a renowned global health expert. Second, we are welcoming Jonathan Chang, Chief Operating Officer at China Surgical Dressing Center, Taiwan's largest face mask manufacturer. Also, Jonathan is a well-known architect and artist. He is an exclusive music and lyric songwriter at Warner Chappell Music Taiwan. A warm welcome to both of you.
We also hear later from legislator Lin Jingyi and Dr. William Chang on Taiwan's pandemic response. Let's now talk about Taiwan's phased approach as it relaxes border controls last October and no longer requires indoor masks in most cases starting from February 20th. As we can see here, Taiwan continues to see an average of around 20,000 new cases daily. This makes it one of the highest among advanced democracies since the country saw its first case 3 years ago. What can we read from this data, Professor, if you could enlighten us on how you see Taiwan's current pandemic response?
Yeah, in terms of confirmed cases of COVID, if we put the total cases reported in the world, and Taiwan is definitely occupied a big chunk of proportion now in the world. So for the past few months, Taiwan is deemed as a hotspot of the pandemic.
Number 3 in the world.
Yeah, so and it's dragged on so almost 9 months now. So if you look at the Taiwan's pandemic controls histories, the first year was quite successful because of border control. And then second years, we have this Alpha Delta that we met the first challenges. But really, this Omicron, which has changed the world. Every country was hit hardly by Omicron, and Taiwan is no exceptions. So this is the biggest challenge we are facing now in Taiwan.
Is there anything that we can read from, say, in terms of the number of daily cases, but the deaths actually not being as severe?
Yeah, you know, Omicron is different from Wuhan. And one specific features is immunity's escape. That means even we have 100% of population vaccinated, you still get infections because this virus has this behavior. Fortunately, Omicron is less severe than previous variants of virus. So the strategy, the goal for controlling Omicron should be focused on deaths rather than confirmed cases. Unfortunately, in the past few months, the country still focused on reporting cases, and that's up and down of cases. That's kind of distorting our attention from the more important target, which is deaths. And so if you read the death numbers, and we can see still over the past 9 months, average daily over 30 cases of death, which is high. That's we have to cut down, and I advocate we have to cut down less than 10 cases per day. That would be our goal.
That's the goal, 10
Yes.
cases per
Wow,
day.
okay. Speaking of COVID, Jonathan, we are curious, on behalf of one of the biggest manufacturers of face mask producing in Taiwan, what was the biggest challenge among the 3 years, you would say?
I mean, I think the initial couple months was the hardest to endure.
Right.
Because unlike anything we've encountered in the world, even SARS, it was very limited to certain territories. But this time it was very fast and was worldwide. So that also affects the whole supply chain in the world. So in that aspect, with such a short to no period to prepare,
Yes.
we have to come out with such a huge demand of capacity. It was quite tough.
You were saying that actually you watched the TV news in 2019 and
Yes.
started to preparing the whole factory to get ready for it?
Yes, the medical device industry is a little bit different from other consumer goods.
Right.
So we have a high season, we have a low season, but we also have a season that we can anticipate. Sometimes we just can't anticipate. And that is the common flu, or in this case, unfortunately, the pandemic. So constantly we were watching global news to see if there's a possibility of even a very common flu that transmits easily. So at that time, we noticed that in Hong Kong in particular, there were cases of we don't know what yet. And then we know that during that time, a lot of people come back for Chinese New Year. So we decided, hey, we need to be prepared just in case. And fortunately, we did prepare. And that's why we're able to have all the raw materials to manufacture during Chinese New Year, the first time in like 20, 30 years that we actually did OT in Chinese New Year.
Wow, that's amazing.
Can I hit that?
Yes, of course.
Taiwan's mass industries
Yeah.
contribute largely to the first year's pandemic control globally. As you know, we have this SARS pandemic
in
2003.
Right.
And we learned masking is working, and for this particular COVID-19, it is mainly through airborne transmissions. So when you don't have any vaccines and pharmaceuticals to treat the illness, then mask is served as a physical vaccine, I would call it. So when you put vaccine a mask on the people's nose and mouth, it serves as a barriers to fend off the Wuhan virus in the first years.
Right.
And through these mass productions Taiwan has done in the first year, it's really revolutionized the kind of infectious disease control in any kind of pandemic before. So the kind of operation from the raw material, supply chain, and scale up, I think it's a lessons we have to learn this time, right, in order to prepare for next pandemic. So I hope this industry can keep all the know-how and can scale up as soon as possible in the future pandemic. Probably in 10 days, you have to produce sufficient masks for the world use in the future. Yeah.
How long did it take, Jonathan?
Right, what was the number? We're curious. Normally for the manufacturing line, the numbers
Right.
you control, for producing.
So the first daily, we actually contribute over 1 million probably But then during the first time they were purchasing, the government was purchasing,
Yeah.
they purchased 3.1 million, and we provided 2.1 million of the face masks.
Were you surprised with that number when the government came over and said, okay, give us 2 million?
Yes, because we were not prepared, right? So we basically had to do overtime during Chinese New Year. And a lot of our employees were very happy to do so. So we were very lucky that we have a really great culture that everybody wants to help out. Yeah.
And actually, February 20th, we relaxed the face mask requirement in Taiwan. But actually, I would say Taiwanese are very behaved, right? Even we have a relaxation of the requirement, people are still wearing it. How would you say about it, Professor? Would you say it's still, you will being like strongly recommend people to keep wearing it?
Yeah, I think so, because at the beginning of this pandemic, I have a conversation with former US FDA, CDC head, and we're in this talk shows and together, and I have hard time convincing him that masking is working.
Right.
Because at the time, all these literatures, half of them say it's working, half of them is not useless. But through our experience in Taiwan, we know it's working, and it become culture now in Taiwan. Since this 2003, every household have some mask.
Yeah.
Right?
Actually, during winter time, with the face mask, it prevents you from cold.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So even before the pandemic, Taiwan has always been like the people were used to wearing face masks. Right, even especially on public transportations and hospitals, and that's all due to because of the SARS that we had to endure
learned from
20
history.
years ago.
Yes.
Yeah, it made a huge difference. So everybody was very cooperative.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned SARS because there's some analysts or historians who mention that the face mask is actually a Taiwanese invention. About 100 years ago, someone of Taiwanese descent started this in the United States. Maybe Professor or Jonathan, do you have more details on this?
Well, in terms of the invention of face masks, I don't think it came from Taiwan. Back in the day, face masks were actually made from gauze, from cotton.
Okay.
It actually has no filtration capabilities. At that time, we didn't even know about probably bacteria or virus or how to filter it. So it was purely for surgical rooms to block the blood penetration. Yeah. So that was a long time
It was about something
ago.
about 100 years ago where a Taiwanese physician, I forget.
No, it's Chinese. It's,
Chinese
you
or
know,
Taiwanese?
When there's a China has a revolution, and there's two doctors. One doctor, Dr. Chang, was leading a revolution in China.
So part of
The
the Republic of
the
China.
other doctor is a public health doctor in Manchuria, and he was the first one widely apply the cotton cloth mask to contain a pandemic in that areas. And so from beginning, this is the West and East conflicts. The East are more accustomed to this masking and say it's working, and it become culture.
And you still see that continue.
Yeah, but not like this in Europe and in US, that cultural war, right, of masking.
Right, right.
So this is one thing that we can provide from Asians' perspective, that in future pandemic control, the tool which are working
Right.
should be adopted quickly by the world. And you know, that's one of the reasons in this pandemic, Africa, because they are young population, the COVID deaths is lowest. And Asia is the second lowest.
Okay.
And Europe, North and South America are highest. Okay, so we have to learn from our region some of these kind of wisdoms, and can be shared by all humanities. That would be good.
We'll actually get back a bit on that with Jonathan in terms of the different markets and you know, how culture comes into play.
Right, right. So actually, Professor, I'm curious with our talk about how popular still in Taiwan, people are wearing the mask, but are like the number of deaths, or even when we were talking about Omicron, the number was still high. How would you interpret that?
Yeah, so
As you have the chart here.
yeah,
right?
you know, if you can look at this
Yes.
figures, I can show you. Through these 3 years, and we are entering the 4th year, right? And the virus, you know, it's changing always. So every year you encounter different kind of virus. So if you don't change your strategy and to accommodate the new virus, then your old tricks will not be working so well. So for the first year, that's the virus enter your lung deeply.
Right.
So the virus concentration in your nose and mouth less than what we have in Omicron, which occupy most in our nose and mouth. Okay, so masking and border control works very well.
Yeah.
Then
First
if this move to Delta and Omicron, especially Omicron, you need higher protection of masks to make it work.
But still with masks.
Yeah, so that's why N94 and N95 are thought to be better protection during the Omicron's era. So in our countries, we are giving out the communications of wearing masks, but still half of population thought the surgical mask is sufficient, right?
Yeah.
But actually, if you're in Europe and in the US, if you want to wear, and they will say, oh, N95 is the best. But if you cannot withstand these pressures by wearing N95, N94 is okay too. So that's we have to cope with, even just masking. The other one is, since Omicron is so transmissible, you have to live with virus. So this is figure show you Singapore and Taiwan's curve.
Yeah.
And you can see, because Singapore start planning live with virus, so they increase vaccination of the whole population.
Yeah, and we can see the curve is going flat. Right?
So the curve
Going
of deaths
down and
going
right.
down wave by wave.
Right.
And Taiwan increase our vaccination, but not at the speed we like. Okay, so that's why we cannot push our deaths per day to the minimums we like. So
What's the remedy, Professor, to push the deaths down, you feel?
Oh, if you look at the Japan and Singapore's case, it's better age 65. You have over 90% of vaccination rate.
Okay.
And in Taiwan, ours elderly can only have 75. So you can see this is almost 15% difference.
So going back, that might be a cultural thing, because if you look in the West, a lot of the elderly actually vaccinate.
Oh no,
Or do you feel it's the other way around?
Still, the vaccination rate, as legislator mentions, that in Asia, the vaccination is always higher than the Western countries.
Okay.
But the point is that for Taiwan, for any society, wearing mask or getting vaccination is a matter of trust. So the trust of the people in experts, in doctors, in governments play a very important role. And every country went through some kind of mistrust, distrust in vaccination due to politics.
Yeah, or the news talk about the death from vaccination.
So unfortunately, the second year, Taiwan has a big argument on vaccinations and which brand to use.
Yeah.
So it creates some kind of mistrust, and some side effects came out and scare people off vaccinations. That's why it's now very difficult to push the vaccination rate high. And we did not encounter that in last year, right?
Maybe the future,
At the very beginning, a little bit.
Yeah, but it's the consensus is high.
Right.
Masking is working, and even you dislike masking, and you will not, fight for this issue.
Yeah.
But for vaccination, we fought so hard.
Yeah, I think for face masks, the culture is a lot more embedded in history, right? So for SARS, after SARS, everybody wore masks when they go to the hospital, right? Before SARS, sometimes employees at the hospitals don't wear masks.
Right.
So I think it was a lot easier to convince everybody to cooperate with the whole regulations. Yeah.
possible solutions, we can come back to talk about that. So we just spoke about Taiwan's pandemic response, ongoing challenges from the virus, and new variants spreading across Europe and the Americas. Coming up next, we'll be hearing from legislator Lin Jingyi on Taiwan's phased approach in opening up and relaxed mask mandates.
Let's now hear from legislator Lin Jingyi. Ling is from the ruling Democratic Progressive Party and is a member of the legislature's Foreign and National Defense Committee. She is also a former ambassador at large and a gynecologist, a physician herself. Lin spoke to me about Taiwan's planned, well-communicated phased approach, a stark contrast to China's abrupt abandonment of zero COVID. Let's take a look.
Because we alert about the pandemic very early during the virus transmissions, so that is first step we preparing for that. But also we have the experience of SARS, so all the nations we keep the same step to prevent the infection becoming so severe. Of course, in past 3 years, our models, especially how to control the disease based on the democratic control, that is a very important policy making procedure to sharing with global society. I think the more important is we are not only to protect ourselves, but also we share our experience, our policies, and we send our face mask and protection in industry to the many countries to share our ability to cooperate with another country. So I think that is most important. In past 3 years, Taiwan became so dominant and so popular to make people understand who we are, and we love to share, to cooperate, to protection to each other.
Given that Taiwan has around 23,000 cases daily and the total number of infections is close to 10 million, how do you see the government moving forward in terms of pandemic prevention in 2023?
We have a new policy announced about to decrease the control, especially the have a more softer about the face mask policy. I think that is very important. We need to welcome more friends or a traveler come from another countries and make Taiwan become normal life after pandemic. I want to point out in Taiwan we have over 85% people receive more than 2 doses of vaccination. That is very high proportions in the pandemic control.
Given that China is also just suddenly moved away, canceled its zero COVID policy, how do you feel Taiwan can further differentiate from China?
We always say our disease control is based on democratic policies. We communicate with population and discuss all the policy best balance the disease control and the economic effect. So we try to balance that, try to not best only control disease, but ignore people's life needs. I think that is totally different with China's policy. Of course, China's changing their policy suddenly, so we could see so many people suffer from the disease during on protection condition. That is totally is so tragedy. In Taiwan, we preparing that step by step. We're preparing about the policies, especially we have 4 vaccinations, and we try to make people understand how to protect ourselves and friends, 1 step, 2 steps. Of course, honestly to say, I think we open our policy a little slowly. That is very careful, but that is another side that we try to protect more weakness population in Taiwan.
Legislator, Taiwan recently sent 2 batches of rescue teams to Turkey to help with the rescue efforts with the earthquake.
Because a very severe earthquake, and Taiwan, we are a country with every year we also suffer from earthquake, many very common. So we had ever be helped by global society during about maybe 20 years very severe earthquake. So this time, when the earthquake happened in Turkey, all Taiwanese people are asking, what could we do? So not only in government, but also in citizens, in populations, we try to help them, try our best. So I think that is the most real step to help to each other. We have a rescue team, and in Taiwan, we have donation actions, try to help them. I want to mention about 2 years ago, we also participate the human rights and the rescue activities in Turkey to donate the rice for the weakness population. So this time, I think that is just we could to do and we want to do to help friends when they suffer because of the earthquake.
How do you feel this has affected Taiwan's international status?
Since 2017, we always say Taiwan can help. And about in recent pandemic seasons, we say Taiwan is helping. It means Taiwan is not only we are not to try to get the conflicts in political issues, but we always think we have ability to help more friends in different countries.
You just heard legislator Lin speak to Rath about how Taiwan's pandemic success has raised the country's global profile and what to look out for in 2023. So, Professor, we just talked about with the population of 23 million in Taiwan, how much the number will we say is sufficient for the face mask when facing the pandemic?
Yeah, during the pandemic, quantity is very important because people are in need and you will create a great anxiety, right? So it's a rule of 100, I always say. If you are using one mask in the normal time during pandemic, your psychological response will be, I probably need 100.
Okay.
Because I'm afraid I cannot get it when I need it. So for a population of Taiwan, like 20 million populations, it's better you get 100 eventually. Then how to do it? How to get to that need?
And 100, you mean 100 per person?
Yeah, per person. You can calculate that. And if you count over the 3 years, how many masks you use? So it's true. But how can you produce when they need most? That's the kind of industrial operation that I believe Taiwanese industry are experts on this. You know, how do you get materials and get all the machines together and to do mass productions? And last year, starting from last year, there's a lot of reviews globally on the future response. You know, it's OECD countries in the futures for vaccines to be used by every people on Earth, 100 days. Okay,
wow.
Testing, 30 days. Like pharmaceuticals, yeah, probably 100 or 200 days. So how about mask? So Taiwan has to propose after this pandemic, we have to propose if there's future need for mask, and can we do it in 10 days, right? Then everybody.
Can we do it in 10 days, Jonathan?
So this is a global pandemic response.
Yeah, from supply chain.
I mean, we would definitely do better.
Right.
You know, if unfortunately this thing comes around again. But let's just put a couple numbers, like before the pandemic.
Okay.
If there are manufacturing companies in Taiwan for face masks, there's probably only 5 to 8 that actually manufacture on a daily basis.
Okay.
A lot of them may be manufactured a couple days out of a week or perhaps even out of the month, right? And then you go from that to over 100 manufacturers during the pandemic. That's a huge difference. So how do you keep this alive, right? How do you keep them healthy enough to stay there and be ready if we need them again? I think that's
an impact though, like on your own business, because you know, as the largest manufacturer in Taiwan, and as you mentioned, 100, has that actually impacted your business in any way? Say, it's actually helped you expand, or does it make it difficult in terms of competition?
It definitely helped us expand a little bit, But at the same time, because our company, we actually have over 600 to 700 products. So face mask is actually only one of the many products that we manufacture.
Okay.
We had to move some people from the other production lines over to face mask. And so that actually, the capacity definitely decreased on the other products. So we were able to shift manpower around. But most of the face mask companies out there, they don't have other products to shift the manpower. So that, for us, we're a little bit healthier because of that aspect. Yeah.
Wow. So, Professor, you are recently launched Capri, you just mentioned, and being the chair. So, you want to share with us what you do with this NGO?
Yeah, so during this pandemic, internationally, a lot of academia or politicians are interested in building a resilient society for the world. Okay, so we have been talking about this, and the one in Taiwan is led by Shirley Lin. She is a professor in University Virginia, and she came back to Taiwan and with Zhengzhi University, and we are good friends since we were at Harvard. So we start talking to people domestically, and through her connections, we have an international link with people from UK, from Australia, from Singapore, Japan, and definitely United States. So we are all focused on this resilience. So the resilience of health, environment, economy. And we put one very important features is innovations. So we like to use this center to provide our Asian Pacific perspective on resilience.
Oh, wow.
And one of the lessons we learned through this pandemic, we know that country in this region definitely has many good things that can help the rest of the world. So we try to abstract some of the wisdoms we learn and some of the lessons, hard lessons, right? Deaths, cases of COVID, and to put it as agenda to influence the world. So we will use this one to influence the G7, G20, this kind of agenda, and try to give the whole world an Asian Pacific perspective. So this NGO is now established in Taipei, and we call it International NGO on Taiwan. And this one, we attract the international experts and talents to work in the center. Currently, the center has all the staff from the world.
That sounds very impressive with
Yeah.
Taiwan's perspective. And
Yes.
So we have to evolve through this pandemic, right? Like industry, like academic, like civil society. I think that's when we are facing these once in a centuries, right? Disasters that we are facing. That's everyone is new to this situation, so we have to learn.
Sure.
So I think that's the kind of dynamics our Taiwanese society can offer. You know, small, but not too small.
Right.
And the reason we have to be the global supply of pandemic goods is our population is not too big. So everything we produce will be consumed very less in Taiwan, right? Then the majority can be used by the rest of the world. If you look at this time, a lot of vaccines are produced in the big countries, and they will use up first. So, you know, geologically, we are in a very good strategic positions to contribute to the world.
Yes.
That's and through our, you know, talent and innovation, especially technological innovation. So Capri has got a lot of support from the Taiwan's tech company, and they really want to put the thinking of innovation to, you know, help the whole world in the futures. Yeah.
going back to how Taiwan can help, I wanted to, Professor talked about innovation.
Yeah.
How is your company, Jonathan, helping the government in terms of raising, say, awareness from Taiwan Can Help? Because I'm sure the face masks that go out there to all these different countries around the world are from your company.
Well, first of all, the face masks in Taiwan, we all print made in Taiwan.
Yes,
Right,
that's what
so
I'm
that's-
going.
yeah.
I was mentioning.
Yes, and for us, we're also doing something different with the mask industry, is we're making it into a fashion accessory. So in Taiwan, in Japan, a lot of people are already used to wearing face masks, but now a lot of people wear face masks because it looks good, it's fashion. So that's why we have so many different designs, so many different colors. We work with global brands and doing collaboration projects, a lot of different things. And I think that has shown the world how innovative we can be. Not just technical innovations, but a lot of from the design, from the branding and that kind of perspective.
I think that's a great point. I lived in Japan, and a lot of people wear it because they say they look younger when they have it on, and depending on what they put on, they can cover their age. And I think that's something that Asians or people in this region care a lot about.
Yeah, I think throughout this pandemic, the demands for face masks is not just because there's a virus out there. There's psychological issues. Some people wear it because they don't want people to talk to them. They'd rather not have people approach them. This actually was apparent in Japan before the pandemic, less in Taiwan, but now in Taiwan, more and more people feel that way too.
So it serves a double purpose.
Yeah, and it's also a sense of security, not from a virus, but it's just the same thing as wearing clothes. You just feel more secure when I wear it. Yeah, so there's a lot of different issues that, the reasons actually why people still wear face masks. Yeah.
And you still see a growth in demand with face masks.
I wouldn't say a growth, but I don't see it diminishing it
Okay.
all the way back to the demand back in 2019 or before. It would definitely be higher, yes.
Professor, speak of the resilience, and you were like nodding. So, do you have anything to add on in terms of your industry?
Yes, I mean, I think being resilient in health, this industry is very, very important.
Right.
So our company was founded in 1947. We're the first manufacturer of medical supplies in Taiwan. And it was founded by my grandfather. The reason he started the company is, back in the day, medical device and surgical dressings were bought from Japan.
Okay.
We rely on them. So in a sense, our health is in their hands. So he decided to start a manufacturing company in Taiwan to say, hey, we need to be in control of our own health. You know, and that is pretty much the same case as 2-3 years ago. We need to have this capability so we don't have to rely on other people, and which we did.
Yes.
You know, so we were lucky in that sense as well.
Right, right. So we just discussed the critical role face masks play in raising Taiwan's international profile as it helped the world when it needed it the most, with its donations of face masks to critical medical facilities and affected populations. Coming up next, we'll be hearing from Dr. William Chang, Taiwan-born and based now in California, and Taiwan's humanistic effect pandemic response.
Let's now hear from Dr. William Chang. Dr. Chang was born in Taiwan and is a pulmonary medicine and critical care physician based in Laguna Hills, California. He was on the front lines during the successive outbreaks of COVID in the United States. He came back to Taiwan to visit during the pandemic and tells me about the difference between the responses in both countries. Let's take a look.
I remember in July of 2020, due to health reasons, I had a chance to go back to Taiwan for a duration of time. And at that time, there were mandatory quarantines in Taiwan. And I remember the whole quarantine process was very organized. From the moment that we landed, we know exactly what to do, where we were given electronic form to fill out, and we also had the testing done, which was very efficient. And we were also given tracking cell phone for each member of us. And I remember arriving in our quarantined place with my family, and the whole process is actually quite humanistic. I remembered there were two police that came right away after we arrived. to check us and make sure that we have everything that we needed. Give us a care package, which include food and some goodies, even waste bags for us to keep our waste, and then give us a mask.
What do you see in terms of the pandemic going forward in 2023?
Yeah, as a critical care doctor and pulmonologist, I remembered COVID initially. It was quite concerning and actually scary. That I remember seeing the first wave back in April 2020. The ICU was full, and we have a very limited resource. I remember the days that we were asked to use N95 mask 5 days straight, and at that time we have very little experience dealing with the daily virus, and I remember the patient dying. Usually they would come in. If they don't get better by day 3 or 4, usually they would pass on. But since that time, for the past year, we have seen the virus becoming less and less virulent, although more transmittable, but less virulent. And so I do think that COVID will become a virus, part of the viral pool that would cause common cold.
Dr. Chang, how do you feel the US approach differs from that of what Taiwan employed in the past 3 years?
Being a clinician in the front lines of dealing with the virus, I remember early on, our office of 13 physicians had to scramble for basic materials such as masks, and that's a big difference when in Taiwan, where my sister runs a clinic. They have allotment directly from the government, and a fairly good guideline in terms of how to deal with the virus and pandemic. And I think there's much more governmental guidance in dealing with the pandemic from the Taiwanese government.
The government announced that on the 20th of February, masks will be no longer required in most cases except for mass public transportation and facilities, medical facilities. As a critical care professional, Dr. Chang, how do you see this?
I think as the virus evolve, there is less concern about the viral infection. And in terms of mask wearing, we do know that it does help in terms of transmitting respiratory illnesses. And what it comes down to, it really is a personal choice. I think medically, if the individual have higher risk for contracting respiratory illnesses, I would still consider wearing masks. And I do think that the timing is reasonable to consider at this time, but I think it needs to be individualized.
We just discussed how Taiwan and other countries around the world continue to battle COVID-19. Let us know in the YouTube comment section whether you think the pandemic will finally be over in 2023. Also, if you like our shows, please subscribe to the Taiwan Talks YouTube channel at Taiwan Talks 2022.
You just heard Dr. Zhang speak to Rath about the stark contrast in COVID responses between the US and Taiwan and how the virus is likely to manifest in 2023. So, Professor, we'd like to talk about the future potential solutions for Omicron or recent variants.
You know, globally, we come to this point and try to end the pandemic emergency.
Yes.
Unfortunately, even we end pandemic emergency, declared by WHO, US, and all the governments, and pandemic it's not ending. And virus is still with us. And I perceive this virus will evolve, and the pandemic will become endemic. That means the virus will be circulating each countries, for a while.
When do you see it becoming an epidemic?
Endemic is almost endemic, and every country will have different levels of infection and death. And currently, Taiwan is on the high level of infection and death. So we have to push down, and every country try to push down. Like in US, they are trying to push the infection and death 10 times lower than the current level. I think Taiwan needs to do that too. And so if we become an endemic, that means you will encounter this virus all the time. So for those susceptible population, like aging population, immune compromised population, still we need protections. And what kind of protections? Vaccinations. Right now people are thinking about annual vaccinations, right? So probably next winter we need another vaccines to come out to match the virus at the time. The other one is all the public health measures will be put into individual hands. So we will have a testing kit, mask, ready that for everyone who think they need to wear. Like I will advise, anytime you encounter of elderly, your relative or your friends, better to wear the mask because the vaccination coverage of this particular age group are not high enough. So it's better to protect. In the crowded places, if you don't need to socialize with people, and masking is very important. And if you go to and come back from a big gathering, better to test before and after, right? That's the new normal we have.
So it's a combination of these three: masks, the testing kits, and also vaccinations.
But once our society reach a very low death rate, then probably we can put aside a little bit for all these measures, but still should be, make them ready in case there is a new outbreak. So this will be a new normal probably for next couple of years. That's I can perceive.
So you don't see masks going anywhere?
Definitely not. Many countries in Asia, you can see even governments say you don't need to wear masks. But over 50% of population will continue to wear masks somewhere, sometimes, especially in public transportation, in crowded subways. I think that has become new normal for many societies.
Thank you for watching today. I'm Gladys.
I'm Rath.
Stay safe and see you next time.